Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 8 of the Tatami Room. This is your host, Martin. This episode is called The Serb and the Hungarian. Let's get started. It's another late night over here in Tanegashima, but trying to deliver this episode to y'all, even though it's a little bit late, so I apologize about that. The first thing I want to do is have the Stoic quote for the episode, which will be by Heraclitus. He is actually not really known for being a Stoic, but this quote by him is Stoic in nature. So here goes. No man steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river, and he's not the same man. And so I found this quote really interesting, just thinking about how life progresses, and even though, a couple years, couple months, you change as well as the things surrounding you. So that was kind of a one that caught my eye. I think perhaps Marcus Aurelius even mentions it in the Meditations, but I know I've heard it in my Stoic readings before. Unfortunately, there won't be the Serbian. There won't be no Marco present in this episode. I was planning to hit y'all with a special episode where my good friend Marco, who's Serbian, would have been my guest, but we sent it a little bit too hard on Saturday night, and we were both kind of out of commission on Sunday when it came to recordings, and we were up to some other stuff, and so it's just me tonight. But the summary for today is we'll have a little daily life section where I'll be talking about T2 teaching and a little bit of confusion, as well as just my adventures that I went on with Marco. Today I'll have a current events section that talks about misinformation, and finally I'll close as always with the stat and word of the week. With that out of the way, let's get started. Alright, welcome back everyone. Let's begin with the daily life section, and first I wanted to talk about T2 teaching and a little bit of confusion that kind of ensued in the rather short week last week. So last Monday was a holiday, and then I took a day off on Friday since Marco came. So it was only a 3-day week, but I did get some new teaching experiences. So some of the schools or classes I went to, I still had to do introductions. I think it was one time, but there was a couple other schools, or there were 2 schools I think, where I was already starting to do T2, or where I was supposed to do T2, which is just like the secondary teaching, what I was hired to do, right? And so it was kind of a mess. And I think the whole problem is that the people at the city hall are my bosses, but they don't really convey, they don't really convey their expectation to me, and I don't think they convey it very well to the schools and the teachers either. They're just kind of like, hey, here's this ALT, use him as you see fit. And so what that means is my kind of job varies school to school, teacher to teacher. Even like same school, different teachers is like a big spectrum. And the problem is, some ALTs only have one school, so you can kind of get adjusted to that. I have 11 schools that I'm rotating between, so each day, each class is just like something completely new being thrown at me. So I'm hoping that I can kind of pick up what they're putting down sooner rather than later. But there is even like one school where I went to where one of the teachers, basically they didn't really know, they just were kind of like, okay, here, look at the textbook and run the class. I'm like, I've never seen this lesson before. I mean, like, I've heard of it, kind of looked it over, but I don't know how to use like the tablet and like the online activities that are embedded within the little tablet they're using. I don't know any of that, so I'm just kind of winging it. I ended up doing a fine job, but not really following. Kind of went off track a little bit. Didn't follow the textbook entirely. Meanwhile, other teachers, they have a lot better idea of like, okay, they've already done the lesson before, I'm assuming, and so they're like, okay, well, this is where I can bring in the ALT, where there's like a pronunciation part, or something like that. They have a better idea of how to utilize me, and so yeah, but it's just kind of a it's a little bit of a mess. I do think that the hierarchy has something to do with it, but yeah, I'm hoping that I can find like a pattern in some of the schools that I can just kind of pick out, because it's a little bit it's a little bit stressful kind of going in and being like, okay, what is this teacher like? Do I remember? What do they kind of know? How are they gonna handle me in the classroom versus another teacher? So we'll see about that moving forward. But overall, a fun week, and since it was short, I didn't feel as tired as I did the first few weeks. Maybe it was also because there are at least some classes where I was kind of like an assistant and not the primary teacher. In any case, I want to move on to talking about my time with my good friend Marco. Marco and I have been friends since early high school, and he ended up coming out to visit me out here, much like my friend Nate last week. Shout out to both of them. You know, coming here from Tokyo is about as expensive as going from Tokyo to Bali. So, you know, most of the time people choose Bali over Tanegashima, but you know, they chose Tanegashima. So, yeah, big shout out. The first day Marco was here, we ended up going on this big Tanegashima tour. I ended up kind of just giving him the same tour that my friend gave me when I got to the island. We headed down, just kind of drove down the coastline, very scenic, just chilled out some random beaches. What is crazy is like these are the kinds of beaches you'll see in Hawaii, right? But there's crowds of people everywhere, and in Tanegashima you'll see maybe one or two people, or no one. You'll have the entire beach to yourself, and so it's just kind of a bizarre feeling, but a good feeling for sure. I mean, we can just kind of do whatever we want, climb some rocks and whatnot. Took some cool photos as well. We also went down to Chikura Caves. I'd visited that before, but we kind of got to explore a little bit more in depth. You know, walked around the beach. We found this like kind of abandoned trail. It was a little sketchy, but we just sent it. We went up, and it was kind of cool. We ended up seeing these pretty big crabs. I only see those in the supermarket, you know, cooled and frozen or something like that, or served on a silver platter, never alive. So it was kind of fun to see them, just kind of scuttling about. Yeah, the trail was definitely a little suspicious. We were slipping all over the place because it was pretty muddy. Yeah, but we made it out. We made it out all right. So it was fun. We also went down to the Elephant Rock, that is pretty famous here. Went to this pink hotel that is pretty iconic. I I have a feeling that there's some money laundering going on over there, just because it's a massive hotel, and like I mean the JAXA, the space agency for Japan, is pretty close by, but Tanegashima does not get many tourists. So I'm like, how are you renting out the entire thing? I think my friend was saying that you can get some sort of like tax break with it, but maybe I'll do that for like a next current event section or some current event section sometime in the future. But it was a lot of fun. The next day we ended up visiting Teppokan, which is the gun museum, and Gesote, which is kind of this cultural house. So Tanegashima is famous for its guns. They were brought over from Portugal in around 1500s, I believe. And recently there's the 480-year anniversary of the first gun that came to Japan, which, you know, it came to Tanegashima. Some of y'all might recall in, I think it was episode 2 or 3, I did an episode, I think it was 3, and the second one was about the typhoon, but the third episode I had a bit about Teppo Matsuri, and that kind of big summer festival is all about basically celebrating that that connection with Portugal, or at least just celebrating Tanegashima history, Nishinomote history, with the first guns entering Japan through Tanegashima, because some Portuguese traders kind of arrived at import. I think what was interesting, I found out the museum, was that the first guns in Japan were actually just called Tanegashima, just because they were from there. And so that's kind of interesting that a whole, now obviously they're called something different, but for a while they were known as just Tanegashima or Tane or something like that, if I recall correctly. The museum was really interesting, but again, it was similar to the Kumamoto-jo or Kumamoto Castle experience, where a lot of it was written in Japanese, and there was a lot of videos, which kind of helped. I tried my best translating for Marco. I don't know how good a job I did, how much he couldn't already get from context, but I tried. But it was a fun time. Gesote was this cultural house, which is part of Tanegashima Castle, called Akaogijo. And you might have noticed that I haven't really talked about not Kumamoto Castle, I talked about that last week, but Akaogi Castle, which is right here in Nishinomote. It's because it's not really a castle, it's just kind of this central area of Nishinomote. They didn't really need a castle like what you would think of as a castle, pointy towers and high walls kind of thing on the island. So their kind of castle was just kind of a central area. There's not really any big walls or ramparts or any of that. In any case, the cultural house was really interesting. We tried archery. I tried with it was a right-handed bow, and I sat down trying to shoot with my left hand because I'm left-handed. That did not work out, they warned me beforehand. I actually ended up hitting a bullseye and beat Marco, which is kind of nice because he's an Eagle Scout, so I kind of got to flex that over him. And we also got to try the Anno Imo sweet potato that Tanegashima is famous for. Finally, I think my highlight was discovering or going to the onsen here in Nishinomote with Marco. I hadn't been to the onsen prior to this week or last week, and we just decided to give it a go one day. We entered like complete foreigners with our pants on, and then halfway through we realized we were not supposed to be doing that, so we just said screw it and went ahead and tried to immerse ourselves in the local way of doing things. Of course, no one said anything when we came in with our pants on, because that's not really how you operate around here. But it was great. There's a really interesting part of the onsen where they had this like electric bath. Marco and I were kind of joking around that if that malfunctioned, the entire anyone chilling in the onsen would just kind of pass away. But I think it was I don't know. I think there's definitely a safe way of doing it, and that's how they were doing it. But there's these little like electric shocks that came through the water in the specific area, and if you put your hand there, you could kind of it tensed up your muscles or whatnot, or it just ran electricity through them. And I've been to an onsen before, but I'd never done the electricity thing, so I thought that was really interesting. I'm not sure if it's my cup of tea, but it was a good experience nonetheless, and getting some sauna time was also pretty nice. So yeah, that was kind of it for the week. Let's move on to a current event section about misinformation coming up. Alright, welcome back everyone. Let's get started with the current events section, which will be on misinformation or combating misinformation. So this section was inspired by a comment that Marco made while we were talking about why he did not want to go to a talk about combating misinformation. So he succinctly summed it up by saying, the best way to avoid or combat misinformation is with your prefrontal cortex. So that got me thinking, okay, is this actually true? Or let me do some research about misinformation. I think it's a kind of an interesting topic. It also reminded me that I did a science project in high school, received an honorable mention for it at the science fair. But it was about astroturfing, which is a phenomenon where kind of big companies create fake grassroots organizations in order to sway public support. So even though the organization appears to be like a grassroots organization and kind of deceives people into thinking that it's a grassroots cause, it's actually just all being kind of orchestrated by a bigger company. But enough of that. Around the mid 2010s, so I guess around the same time I was in high school, people started to be aware of the kind of misinformation problem, because around that time, like 2017, 50% of people use social media for some type of news already. And I'm assuming that that figure has kind of, well, it's only increased. And I would say that that figure is probably at 75% right now, that being a conservative estimate. Also, by that point, mid 2010s, trust in media had been falling for a while, but it kind of reached a record low in 2016 at 32%. 32% is the end of the data set that I was looking at. So it probably it's kept on falling. At least that's what I would suspect, given kind of the current political climate in the U.S. So fast forward to now. Companies are trying to combat this. Politicians are trying to combat this. Some companies like Reuters are, creating their own misinformation combating departments. On the other hand, the Biden administration recently announced its plans to tackle misinformation for the 2024 election. So in 2020, if y'all remember, a lot of news and news sites, websites cracked down on misinformation about COVID, the COVID vaccine, the election, among other things. But by 2023, this trend has been kind of, it's been reversed, to say the least. Basically, a bunch of lawsuits arguing that such kind of crackdowns are impinging upon the First Amendment, as well as kind of the leadership of Twitter, or X as it is now called, have pushed this trend back into the other direction. So more recently, social media companies and news sites have taken a more laissez-faire approach to what can be posted on their platforms. And so that's kind of left the Biden administration in an interesting situation. Like, what do? You can't, call out social media companies to, take down that kind of information. Where it's not possible for them to do so. So what are you going to do about it? And so what Biden has done or has announced is that he's going to do what I'm calling a sort of drown them out approach, where he's going to have a massive media team that will, basically flood the internet with paid advertisements that are kind of protecting or trying to counter the false advertisements that are out there. So I'm not sure which approach is better, whether it's kind of the regulation approach that sort of can violate the First Amendment at times, or is this like can't beat them, join them. If there's going to be fake information out there, then we'll flood the market with information that kind of protects us from the fake information. I think that's just kind of a zero-sum game where it just means that politicians need even more money to finance their campaign. I don't know. I'll leave y'all to kind of make a verdict on that. I got two things I wanted to share to kind of end the episode. So I only read the abstract for this paper because it was behind a paywall, but it was recently published in Nature about just evaluating misinformation it was a very big study. And what they found was that analytic cognitive style and stronger accuracy-related motivations basically increase one's ability to detect misinformation and, I guess, in a sense, counteract it. Whereas sort of endorsement of individual responsibility over government support went in the opposite direction. It meant that an individual was less capable at determining what information was false and which ones were true. And I think endorsement of individual responsibility over government support is just kind of a fancy way of saying, like, kind of not having trust in the government and basically so sort of being more conservative, I guess. I don't know. Valuing one's own judgment and heeding the government less. So, but if you were analytical in your thinking, then you have a better chance at detecting fake news. So good for you. I think these kind of lend credence to Marco's suggestion earlier that the prefrontal cortex is the best way to deal with misinformation. If you have a analytic style, then you're good to go. And finally, I also wanted to share that perhaps unsurprisingly, X ranked the lowest among social media websites surveyed about handling misinformation. I think after Elon Musk took over Twitter or X, it's kind of its policies regarding misinformation haven't been very scrutinous. But he's not an outlier, or X is not an outlier, because other social media weren't far behind. So it's not the best or not the most truthful social media climate that we are in right now. All right, with that, let's cut to the outro. All right, welcome back, everyone, to the closing section. Thank you all for making it this far into the episode. Let's do the word and the stat of the week. I'm going to start with the word of the week, which is yoyakusuru, or yoyaku, which means reservation. This is what you would use in Japan if you wanted to kind of make a reservation at a restaurant. Yoyakushimasu or yoyakusuru. That's the word for reservation. Now, the stat of the week is 200 yen per liter, which is the gas money that I am paying here in Tanegashima. So by current exchange rates, 200 yen per liter would be $1.33-ish per liter. And if we're looking at like 1 liter being, or 4 liters being a gallon, it'd mean that my 1 gallon of gas is like $5.20, give or take. So it's not very cheap. Luckily, my car is, I think it's pretty fuel efficient, and I don't have to travel too long of distances. But I think that's interesting that the gas money here is. I thought it would be cheaper, but I guess it's an island, and I guess gas has been more expensive as of late. But that's your word and your stat of the week, word being yoyaku, and your stat being 200 yen per liter. Again, thank you all for coming back and listening to episode 8 of the Tatami Room, the Serb, and the Hungarian. I hope you all have had a great week, and I hope you all have a great week this week or next week. Peace and love.